So apparently it's going to be a totally new teaching and learning experience. Actually, we tried it a little last term when we had to make this shift. But this time it's totally different because we will have to start everything. We will have to plan everything for an online term. Our summer school instructors have witnessed it actually very recently, so they may have their valuable insights, experiences, and life-saving strategies maybe. We'd love to hear about them at the end of the session if we may have some time, hopefully. Today's agenda is quite loaded, actually. First of all, set the agenda by talking about flipped learning for some time, because this will be the educational approach that I will be suggesting to you this in this presentation. So we will be talking about its relation to synchronous and asynchronous lessons, its benefits, how we can split the content, and how we can design the flow of our classes. And then we'll be moving on with the reading skill. After covering the basics of reading skill, which we actually all know, I will be trying to suggest some sample activities. And the flow we'll be following with the reading skill will also be applying for the listening skill. And finally, if we will still be alive, we will be finishing with key principles for successful flipped classrooms as a wrap-up to today's session. So, flipped learning is the upside down version of traditional classrooms. So what was once homework is now the actual classwork, and what was the classwork, what was once classwork, is now can be considered homework. So it's like the upside down version of the traditional classrooms. The aim of flipped learning is actually collaboration and interaction, and help students practice skills. So here, practice, interaction, and collaboration, these are some of the keywords that make flipped learning receive a lot of praise in the recent years, actually. And because this term we will be using 50% of our time in our synchronous classes, I think flipped learning is a good alternative to design when planning our classes. Okay, so a more extensive definition of flipped learning comes from Berg and Sams in their 2014 article. I will kindly ask you to take a second to read this definition. Okay, so there's this individual learning space where students are on their own, doing tasks by themselves. Okay, and then there is this interactive learning environment where everyone is together with also with the educator, the teacher, and all students together, engaging creatively, actively, participating actively in classroom. So this is the idea of flipped learning. And how can we apply this to our classrooms? To make it more clear, I want to use a mini illustration actually. So when we have a look at this, continuum, on the one end, you see that there is the student individually studying the material, exposing himself or herself to the material that has been assigned by you, okay? And on the other end of the continuum, the students are together with their teacher doing some collaborative tasks. Maybe they're doing some discussions or practicing some skills, but there's exchange of information, there's filling of gaps, and there is active participation in the classroom. Okay, at this point, I would like to ask you a very short question, actually. I will want you to think about, for example, our English 101 instructors, 102 instructors, okay? Because I'm not very knowledgeable about the content of our elective courses, that's why. Can you think about some some activity or some component in our English 101 or 102 classes, okay, that that can be done somehow by the student himself or herself without feeling the necessity of the others, okay? So please think about it. Try to find an answer to this question. Some component, an objective in our syllabus or a component, okay, which a student can, deal with himself or herself without needing anyone else. Okay, just think about it, and then we'll move on. All right. So this individual learning space, this individual learning time, can of course be matched with asynchronous learning time. So a student will be at home doing the fulfilling the tasks, doing the exercises, or işte, some individual work. Okay. And when we're together, when we're on WebEx, for example, then of course it's time for synchronous class time. Okay, so going back to our question, I will want you to use our chat function on WebEx. Can you write maybe one word or a phrase where you're going to tell me, with which you're going to tell me a component which can be done asynchronously by the student himself or herself? He or she wouldn't even need you as his or her instructor. Okay. Input on citations. Yes. Some reading. Exactly. Okay. Some listening maybe. CBT. Exactly. Our new input materials, yes, the H5P tasks. Some input, exactly. Okay, some vocabulary study might also be done asynchronously. Yes, okay, so I think we got the idea, all right? Thank you very much for your responses, arkadaşlar. And the literature associates, lower order learning objectives and higher order learning objectives with the two ends of this continuum. So, of course, as you might assume, as you might predict, lower order learning objectives would go under the individual space. And while working synchronously with their classmates, the students would be practicing, studying, trying to achieve higher order learning objectives. Okay, so this is what we would be considering while planning our lessons this term. And this might have reminded you of Bloom's taxonomy cognitive skills for sure. So understanding, remembering, studying some certain material would be some of the, objectives that we want to address in our asynchronous teaching time, and more higher order learning objectives like application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and creation. The ones that are on the upper levels of the ladder would of course be the ones that we would be dealing with in our synchronous classes on WebEx, for example, in our WebEx meetings or in our Zoom meetings. Okay, so I think this is really important. So when you're in doubt about choosing what to do in which phase of this educational approach, in which phase, synchronous or asynchronous, you can think about Bloom's taxonomy of cognitive skills. And this question, the question I just asked you, does the student need you or need others to be able to fulfill this task? Okay, this is, I think, very important. Okay, so this freedom of time and space, because we have the flexibility here, this freedom of time and space, of course, brings about some benefits of flipped classes. So let's see. First of all, it's personalization, okay? So, for example, last term, I had a student who had hearing problems. So this student might be benefiting from flipped learning because, the students can pause the listening, listen to it twice, play with the pace of the listening. So it helps with specific learning difficulties. Another benefit of such an approach would be, self-pacing. Again, some learners are slower than others, and they may need some more space. When we are in classroom all together, sometimes, we cannot address the differentiation issue. But here, when it is flipped, I think we have this flexibility because students will be, in charge of their own learning. Another benefit would be offering choice, because some people, for example, study better at night, while some others might be learning better during the day. So there's a lot of choices. So this time management, prioritizing skills gives a lot of choice, as well as developing inner discipline, hopefully. Okay, and I try to group the other benefits under active learning, because there is, focus on higher order skills. Think about your traditional classrooms, arkadaşlar. Were we always focusing on or facilitating higher order learning skills in our traditional classrooms? I thought about it myself, and personally speaking, I wasn't. Most of the time, I was the one who was speaking. Of course, I tried to engage students as much as I could, but all those input materials and everything, now this will, free up a lot of space for more meaningful, more engaging, more participating environment in our synchronous classes. So there's this focus, and also there's a lot of interaction between students. So when we are together with the students, arkadaşlar, this term in our online classes, make sure that there is interaction. Make sure students are actively doing something, practicing, practicing, or let's say implementing, creating something. If you can design such teaching time in your synchronous classes, there will be a lot of interaction. Again, returning back to our former traditional classrooms, my classrooms, for example, were not interactive 100%. So this time we have this chance, opportunity in some way. And learner ownership, at the end of the day, it comes down to learner autonomy, because they will be taking charge of their own learning and actively controlling their learning process. Okay, so I think we now have an idea about how we can split our content, but let's see what Future Learn suggests to us about splitting content. So we have our asynchronous and offline teaching time. There we can ask our students to do some independent study. So they would be revising something or reading something or watching or listening, just like the responses I received in our chat, exactly. And there can also be asynchronous and online tasks, some online work to be done by the students, but again, asynchronously, individually, without the teacher and without everyone being there. Okay, so that would go under asynchronous and online headline. Here, maybe students can be doing some research, some online research, discussion forums. I know that many of us use Padlet or Jamboard, some other, collaborative walls or boards on the internet. So they can be posting their discussions. They can be posting forums. They can be watching videos or TED Talks. So these would fall under this category. And finally, of course, there is this synchronous and online component of our courses, where we would be doing a lot of discussions, screen sharing, presenting, question and answer sessions, maybe some collaborative activities, synthesizing information, creating or producing. So this is what Future Learn suggests, and I wanted to adapt it to our case to our classes. And believe me, it's like the same thing, because we can be using this suggestion very easily, actually. So all input videos, all hani ne bileyim instructor recorded videos, the H5P videos, reading, watching, listening. So our elective language instructors are also here among us. So this also applies to you. So just like the chat responses, so these are things that can be done offline without the necessity of everyone being together. Okay. And when it is time for online synchronous activities, you can, design discussions, Socratic seminars, presentations, screen sharing by you or by your students, group work, collaborative work now that we have breakout rooms, and practicing skills can be some of the components that you. At this point, I'd like to ask another question to my English language colleagues again. Can you tell me, okay, think about our English 101 and 102 classes. Can you tell me one component which we actually used in flipped fashion? I mean, there was something we were doing actually in classrooms, but it was done in a flipped learning. So they would be doing something on their own at home, and then we would be doing some. Oh, okay, exactly. Dear Sevda Hocam just gave the answer. Yes, CBT. So you know why we liked CBT? Thank you very much, Didem Hocam. I think, yes, CBT discussions, exactly. So I think the reason why we all liked our CBT component was because of this. Because students were prepared, they studied material at their own pace, in their own time, in their own comfort zone. Okay, exactly. And then we would be, talking about them, discussing things about it in class. And for our elective instructors, what is the CBT component? Actually, it's like a package of materials that we would give to our students, like a few articles plus links to related TED Talks or some videos or some audio files. We would ask our students to, study those materials at home under one theme, by the way, and then we would be discussing, holding Socratic seminars, doing some group work, and mainly discussion, text discussion. So this was quick explanation of the CBT component for our elective language instructors. So, okay, so we were actually doing it. And now we have even more time to do it, because 50% of our time can be done asynchronously. So please use your time in such a way that you save your energy and you save your time, and classes into full sessions, both for you and for your students. Let me show you now at this point one flow, a sample flow of. This was, by the way, suggested by Paul Thier in his 2020 article. So in the synchronous class, you can make some introductory work. I mean, you can design some activities to introduce the material that you will be talking about later on. So some short preparatory classwork, like vocabulary study, okay? Then would come asynchronous components, and students would be assigned some certain homework, some sort of responsibility. And please don't feel bad about assigning homework to your students this term, because I'm that kind of a teacher normally, because we have our asynchronous components, I mean, okay? So please assign some homework to your students, like assigning reading, for example. And then would come synchronous session again, where you would be doing the main classwork, okay, like text discussion. Okay, now let's adapt this suggested flow to our components, shall we? Okay. This is a sample input lesson, just a sample flow. I hope this is useful. So in one of our synchronous class, I can, for example, introduce the paraphrasing skill. This is just an example. You can use this idea, you can use this flow for any type of input material we have in our syllabus. So introducing the paraphrasing skill. Like, for example, you can show examples of paraphrases. You can ask your students to distinguish between good and bad paraphrases, poor ones and better ones. You can show them, or you can even model one to your students so that they can have an idea about what paraphrasing is. And even you can use our textbook, Unit 1, Atatürk's text, and you can ask your students to, identify paraphrases in the text. Like, there are a lot of parenthetical information, so they will have to find the paraphrases, and they may try to distinguish the difference between a quote and a paraphrase. So this is, exploration, exploring content, discovery. So they think about it, they get used to the idea, they are introduced to the idea, okay? And then in their asynchronous time, you can refer your students to self-study materials. Now, it can be your videos or voiceovers, instructor designed, instructor prepared videos, or the department prepared videos. We have a lot of, interactive videos this term. It's like magic. So I'd like to thank at this moment everyone who were somehow involved in this project, because that's what we needed actually. And my presentation today is much more meaningful because you have prepared those interactive videos. Thank you very much, every one of you. So those materials, or the ones you prepare yourselves, okay, so give them some material to expose themselves to study, again, at their own pace, in their own time, in their comfort zone, okay. Maybe this time they will learn APA, arkadaşlar. Will they? I don't know. Because when I teach them in class, they don't. Maybe that was the problem. I mean, they need more time to digest, or they need more, I don't know, more examples, maybe. Okay, so they do it in their asynchronous time, like interactive videos. And then would come the synchronous extension of the same class, practicing the skill. Divide the students, okay, into breakout rooms, and give them paraphrases, content, some excerpt to be paraphrased, and ask them to paraphrase that excerpt or paragraph within their group. You can use Google Docs, or you can use cloud-based walls like Padlet, or even you can even do it with a Word document because they have the chance to share their screen. So one student would be sharing the screen, and he or she would be writing their paraphrase. I mean, there are a lot of ways of helping them practice the skill in our synchronous time. Now let's see a sample CBT lesson. Again, for my elective colleagues, arkadaşlar, it's a package we, some sort of materials actually under one theme. And we want them to read the materials and listen to the materials, and then we hold discussions about that theme. So that's basically the idea again. So in our synchronous classes, we can brainstorm on the CBT topic. How can we do that? You can use online brain map, mind map tools. I'm going to be suggesting a few. I just did some search about them, and there are a lot of mind mapping tools, collaborative and interactive. So they're very useful. So you can make use of them and have them make a mind map about your CBT topic, or you can, ask them to post some responses or keywords about your about your theme, basically. And when It's time for asynchronous study, the CBT material itself. So students would be reading or watching the videos. And when it is synchronous time again, it's the extension. That's the most meaningful learning time, teaching and learning time, because there is reflection, there is discussion, and our favorite activity, Socratic seminar, would go very well with such a flow, actually. I hope I'm not going too fast. I hope you can follow me. Okay. Now let's adapt this to one of our listening. Evet, yes. Oh, so reading first, reading classes. Şimdi, yeah, this time I've changed the order a little bit. So as you can see, I'm starting with asynchronous introduction, because this is also doable, arkadaşlar. One can also be regarded as a reading lesson. So acaba can we change the order of our synchronous, asynchronous classes to add some variety, or depending on our purpose, you can play with that. Though I will not be advising you to change the order all the time, sometimes depending on your purpose, depending on your plan, okay, the weekly plan, you can make changes, of course, announcing it beforehand to the students. So let's see a different version now, okay? This time, I'm giving some vocabulary study as homework, for example. So I'm starting with an asynchronous component. They study vocabulary, they check collocations, they make themselves familiarized with some certain items, word items. And then when we're together on WebEx, for example, we can do some jigsaw reading. So this is important, this is striking. Arkadaşlar, you don't have to assign reading all the time. So reading is one of the skills that can be safely saved for asynchronous learning time. I agree with you, but sometimes you can also use reading in your synchronous classes. But the thing is, you shouldn't be, sitting in front of your computer and the students reading the text. So this is not what we want in our synchronous classes. We want some noise, some activity. So in that sense, if you were to save your precious reading text to a synchronous class, then maybe you can go with jigsaw reading. Is jigsaw reading doable in online classes? Actually, yes, they are. You can, divide students into breakout rooms and give parts of text, like Atatürk's text, for example, is a perfect text for jigsaw reading, because there are, parts in the text. Okay, very much doable. And then students would be forming new groups and discussing or sharing information, exchanging information. This requires some organization, though, some planning, though, but organization and planning is half of being a teacher, I think. We're always organizing and planning things anyway. Okay, so, and you can also continue with synchronous class again. You can, check comprehension. You can answer some comprehension questions if you're not feeling very safe with what students got in their groups with jigsaw reading. As a whole class, you can check comprehension, or you can hold class discussions. So this is a mixed up, order, but it's again a very good plan for a very fruitful lesson. And now that we've seen one reading lesson sample, why don't we now see one sample for listening? Okay. So you can start by introducing the concept again. So instead of doing, vocabulary study all the time, this time I'm giving an example from our 211 course book. So you can, use the mini poll on graffiti. You can create a mini poll on graffiti. How can you do that? You can use Google Form, Google Docs, or you can use Poll Everywhere, or some other, polling responding tools like Monkey Survey. SurveyMonkey. Okay. And you can, make them fill out one questionnaire, maybe. So you may want to adapt some of the material you have in your course book to electronic mode somehow, to an electronic version. So if there is a mini questionnaire at the beginning of your reading, for example, you may want to, use SurveyMonkey for the same questionnaire, and students would be doing in real time, and you would be seeing answers, and it would be something interactive. So you can create a mini poll on graffiti, okay, and then students in their own time, at their own pace, can be listening to Banksy's listening and maybe doing some research on graffiti. And of course, the best follow-up for such a class would be information exchange, some debates on graffiti or Socratic seminar on graffiti. So some sort of, information exchange. Okay. So this idea, these two phases of instruction can be adapted to any component in any of our lessons arkadaşlar. Zaten like when you have a look at the syllabus, okay, it tells you itself. I mean, the division is very clear. I mean, this doesn't require too much planning and too much, thought. This is not something really very difficult. When you have a look at your syllabus, actually it tells you, and this is something to be done, that should be done individually by the student. Can do in our synchronous classes. Basically, our classes, because they're skills classes, lend themselves very well to such an approach. It's really easy. Okay, so sum up what we have been discussing so far. So this is the asynchronous learning time, a little illustration. And but still I have a reminder here. Try to make them as collaborative as possible. So let's still, in asynchronous time, let's still avoid purely read and respond tasks, like assigning the reading and assigning comprehension questions, assigning listening, assigning listening comprehension questions. Let's try to avoid that also for our asynchronous classes. You can still go with group work or pair work. Students can be doing something asynchronously outside the class, and they may be sending, their group paraphrases, for example, to you. So think about it. Let's avoid purely read and respond tasks for our asynchronous classes. So that's a little reminder. And this would, of course, symbolize our synchronous learning time, where everyone is together, and you would be seeing those mini icons here, which represent information exchange, completion of tasks together, discussions. So we can be doing it all together, or in breakout rooms where the teacher is there in the middle and students would be, setting materials in the breakout rooms. So how are we going to proceed? Briefly, arkadaşlar. So, of course, this requires some planning. So just taking a moment to think about what you can do and what you would want your students to do, and setting routines and a very clear structure, I think, is key to success in flipping. So try not to play much around with your synchronous and asynchronous distinction. Try to be clear. Your students should know when they will be meeting you. They should know their responsibilities. Just like you, they should be very clear about which component to be done at home and which component to be done in class. So at this moment, I can suggest you a mini, writing a mini plan. For example, you might be sending every Sunday, let's say, every Sunday evening or every Wednesday evening for the upcoming week or upcoming 2 weeks, let's say. So you can have little plans and you can share them with your students. So this was one of the plans I shared with my students last term. So we would be assigning some homework for our asynchronous time if we will not be meeting with our students 100% of our time, and engaging activities in synchronous classes. And of course, your reaction, your evaluation of the process is the most valuable thing. So because you may want to make some improvements and do some revisions maybe for the next time. Okay, so this was again presented by FutureLearn. Of course, this doesn't clearly apply to our classrooms, but having an activity log or having a mini table like this while looking at your weekly schedule might help you organize your idea. So you can, think about planning a mini activity log for yourself. Right. And now, okay, so I think we've mentioned it already. I think now, let me check the time. It's, I hope this was useful. This was like setting the stage. And from now on, actually, we talked about reading classes and we talked about listening classes. We talked about some sample flows. But we will focus more on the individual skills, reading and listening namely. Would you like to take a short break at this moment? I don't know if you're willing to. We can take a short break if you like. Good idea. Arkadaşlar, okay. So arkadaşlar, it's like, shall we? Ne yapalım? Like it's 25. Can we meet again at 10:25? Would that be okay? Yes, a short one. Short one, like 8-minute long. Okay. All right. So 7-8 minutes. So 10:25. We'll be back here. Very much. Okay.
Elif Hoca, can you hear me? Elif Hoca duyabiliyor musun? Duyamıyorum. Duyamıyorum. Sen kapalısın galiba. Sen kendini açabilecek misin? Ha, şimdi. Tamam.
Açtım. Neden kapanmış bilmiyorum. Buyurun hocam.
Öyle. Pardon bölmeyeyim. Sen de belki bir break alacaksın. You deserve a next break. Ve şimdi bu timing falan derken bu çocuklar bu dönem, yaz dönemi tabii çok rahattı. 2 ders maksimum alıyorlardı veya bir tane. Şimdi bilmiyorum alttan üstten nasıl alacaklar, ne olacak? Bütün hocalarda bunlara gibi yok biyoloji, yok kimya, bir sürü şey veriyor. Hani o at home to do something. Peki bunu zavallılar ne yapacaklar? Yani biz tabii bir de İngilizceyi bazen bu yüzden kızabiliyorlar. Aman bize neler yaptırıyorsunuz gibi. Ben orada biraz endişeliyim bu dönem için. Hani yazın bu işler çok rahat oluyor. Zaten hep active teaching'de de yazın çok rahat ediyorduk. Hızlı oluyordu ama öğrenciler kendilerini toplayabiliyordu. Şimdi tabii zaten zavallıcıklar kendi köşelerinde bazen breakleri oluyor, bazen işte internet çalışmıyor neyse. Ben diyordum bu vereceğimiz ödevlerde tabii yani onları nasıl minimize edebiliriz? Yani böyle concise, daha böyle clear, berrak ödevcikler nasıl verebiliriz ki? Ha bu da güzel bir şeymiş ben bunu yapayım deyip öteki biyolojisini, matematiğini, kalkülüsünü yapsın diye. Evet. Benim kaygım bu. Yani bölmek
haklısınız. Yo çok haklısınız hocam. Aynı endişeyi ben de taşıyorum aslında. Çünkü hani sunumda da demin konuşurken de Aslında hissetmişsinizdir. Ben de ödev vermeyi seven bir hoca değilim çok fazla. Çünkü zaten öğrencilerimiz çok yoğunlar. Programları çok yoğun. Şimdi yalnız şöyle bir şey var. Bu dönem en az %50 senkron
Öyle.
istedi
Evet.
bölümümüz bizden. Hani bu şu demek, benim zaten senkron olarak hani öğrenciyi bilgisayar başında tutmadığım, hani 101-102 dersi için mesela konuşuyorsak bir 2 saatim var.
Hı
O
hı.
2 saati hani kullanması için öğrenciye
Ha,
bir assignment verilebilir. Bunu da yapmamız lazım. Eğer bunu yapmıyorsak Necla Hocam, zaten bütün derslerimizi senkron yapmamız gerekiyor. Yani ödev vermek istemiyorsanız da senkron lazım. Çünkü öbür türlü 2 saat senkron yaparız. Ödev de vermezsek benim ders saatim düşer 2'ye. Hani gibi bir durum oluyor.
evet.
O
Evet.
yüzden burada şey çok önemli. 2 saati geçmeyecek. Hani efor
Evet.
gerektiren
Evet.
zamanlama olarak çok yüklü hani materyali aynı anda vermemek lazım.
Evet.
Örneğin hani CBT deyip duruyoruz. Bütün CBT'yi bir
Yok.
haftada
Yok.
yapmalarını beklememek. Evet, belki 2'ye bölmek, hatta 3'e bölmek
Evet.
olabilir. Yani öğrenci, hatta ben şöyle söylemeyi düşünüyorum. Belki küçük bir olabilir. Öğrencilerime diyeceğim ki hani bu birlikte olduğumuz zaman ama diğer ders saat düşünürsek eğer, diğer 2 saat ders saatim sizin İngilizceye ayıracağınız zaman. Hani ders
Evet.
saatinde de, çünkü onların programları eskisi gibi diğer programlarıyla
Tabii.
çakışmayacak şekilde oluşturuluyor. Kendi ders saatimizde yeterince yeterli olacaktır.
Evet.
Bu ders saatini kullanın. O ders saatini kullanmak istemiyorsanız da başka bir akşam hani bu vakti harcayın
Hı
hani
hı.
gibi. Ve ben aslında bütün hepimiz adına böyle düşünüyorum ki sadece kendi adıma değil, muhtemelen vereceğimiz asenkron ödev ya da task'ta o kalan 2 saatin hepsini
Yeter.
tutmayacaktır hocam.
Evet.
Yani her şekilde öğrenci karlı çıkacaktır hani
Evet.
iş yükü açısından diye düşünüyorum.
Evet.
Buna çok dikkat etmemiz lazım. Hani bunu da bir şekilde vurguladığınız için çok teşekkür ederim. Hani öğrencinin gerçekten ben çok video izledim ve hani bir şeyler de okudum bu sunum için. En çok söylenen şey hani öğrenciye bu süreçte yardımcı olmak. Onları asla amacımız hani yıldırmak,
Evet.
bezdirmek
Ha,
değil.
evet. Evet.
Tersine.
Rahatlatmak.
Evet.
Evet.
Tam
Özellikle
tersine rahatlatmak. Yani birlikteyken eğlenceli, gerçekten hani arkadaşlarıyla da hocayla da bir şekilde sosyalleşebileceği bir ortamı ayırmak ve arkadaşlar 2 saatimizi yapmıyoruz ya, onun için sizden hani haftaya şu saate kadar şu materyali okumanızı rica ediyorum.
evet.
Bunu yapmak zorundalar. Yani öbür türlü dediğim gibi ders saatim yarıya düşer.
Evet. Yok, onu yapıyorlar. Yani
Hı
e,
hı.
şey yapıyor. Bir de işte bilmiyorum, bazen bir 8 ders alan öğrenci oluyor. Normal zamanda da şey yapıyordu o. E, Onun için umarım ben şimdi senin de bölmeyeyim. Ben bir sesimi falan keseyim.
Ay,
Sen de
estağfurullah.
suyunu iç, kahveni iç.
Estağfurullah.
Görüşürüz.
Estağfurullah. Çok
Zaman
teşekkür ederim.
geçiyor
Çok
çünkü.
çok önemli bir soruydu. Yani gerçekten çok önemli bir soruydu. İyi ki sordunuz. Çok teşekkür ederim hocam. Kayda da
Estağfurullah.
geçmiş oldu.
Tamam. Çok teşekkürler bu arada
Ben
tekrar.
teşekkür ederim hocam.
Elif, merhaba. Fadime ben.
Fadime hocam. Ee,
Merhaba.
Merhaba.
Ekranım kapalı, açabilirim de ama Necla Hoca ile konuştuğunuz şey bence güzeldi. Toplantının başında hatırlatma anlamında bence herkese de söylemekte fayda var gibi geldi. Ekran karşısındaydım, ben ayrılmadım da
Hı hı,
kulak misafiri oldum konuşmanıza.
hı hı.
Güzeldi
Tamam.
yani, değil mi? Çünkü herkesin
Tabii ki de
kafasında olabilir bu soru.
bu var. Tamam. Çok
Teşekkür ederim,
teşekkürler.
çok sağ
Bence
olasın.
ben teşekkür ederim. Hı. Hello, everyone. I think we're back, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining again. I hope this is good time for you spent, a good time for you. And during the mini break time, dear Necla Hoca just asked me a very important question. And so we were discussing in Turkish, and some of you were not here. So maybe I may mention our discussion during the break time. So Necla Hoca just asked me whether we would be frustrating our students with a lot of homework now that they have other classes, and the online education itself is frustrating for our students. They may be having low internet connections, or they may be having a lot of homework and assignments, and on top of all this, if you would be would that be frustrating for our students, which is a very meaningful question. So thank you for highlighting this, dear Necla Hocam. And I tried to tell her, my response was we would be doing 50% of our classes synchronously, and so the other 50% has to be done either synchronously or asynchronously. I mean, if I will not be assigning some work to do for their individual learning space, then I will have to be doing everything synchronously. So that's another option, by the way. So you can do everything synchronously, but I think that this is not economizing your effort and economizing your time. So because some tasks by nature lend themselves perfectly to asynchronous study. So in that sense, let's try not to exceed the 2-hour time. For example, if we're talking about English 101 or 102, 2 hours for synchronous classes and 2 hours for asynchronous classes. So let's try to give our students tasks that wouldn't require more than 2 hours. And I believe in our department, no one will be, loading that much work that would exceed this time limit. So maybe reminding your students that, the other 2-hour slots in your timetable would be used for, they can be using this time slot for the homework that you would be assigning, even if they will not be doing it by then in those 2 hours time duration. They may be doing it at night or during some other time, but we have to. Otherwise, if we don't give homework and if we only do 50% of our synchronous class time, zaten the class becomes a 2-credit course, which is not. Okay? So you will have to make this decision. But I'm totally there with you, dear Necla Hocam. I don't also like giving much homework, but I have to do something to make those other 2 hours valuable. So let's not give too much homework, frustrating. Maybe instead of giving the whole CBT at once, for example, dividing it into parts might be a good idea. So I'm sure we can manage that, and we won't be frustrating our students. What I've realized while doing some research for this presentation is that during in any form of online education, it's very important to help students, to assist students somehow, and frustration, isn't something we want to cause, that's for sure. Thank you. Okay, so that was English translation of what we discussed. And so let me again share my screen with you, if you allow me. Spoiler. Okay, so now it's time to talk about the reading skill. I'm not the person who would be talking about the reading skill, because that's what our department is about, the skills. We're the skills department. So we talk about, we teach reading, listening, reading and writing. So that's That's our job. That's the definition of our job anyway. But I will be suggesting some sample activities which you can also use in your online classes. Okay arkadaşlar. The reading skill, although it's a receptive skill, it's really difficult for our students. So these are some of the reasons why reading is very difficult for our students. Basically, unknown vocabulary, lack of familiarity with the topic, some concepts. Okay, so of course, low proficiency in the language is the big thing, which can be solved in the long run. But at least with the others, we can help our students become better readers or become even more, motivated, or changing the attitude of our students towards reading might even be a perfect starting point. Okay, so what can we do to help our students acquire some of the reading skills without frustrating? Of course, arousing interest. So this goes hand in hand with our topic selection, with the activities we design. So if you just let them read and do some comprehension questions, of course, this is not your destination. Okay. So integrating skills. So of course, using pre and post activities before and after. A variety of reading skills. So reading, of course, is not only, done for reading comprehension. There are different types of reading, and maybe we can sprinkle these different skills to our reading classes. Teaching strategies. So metacognitive skills, arkadaşlar, seem to be very important. When you read articles about reading, I'm sure you have you realize that strategy training is at the core of teaching reading. And yes, Duygucum, I totally agree with you. They don't have intrinsic motivation. They may not have intrinsic motivation. Let's have them, let's make them have extrinsic motivation. That would also be okay for us. But, if we change their attitude somehow, oops. You're annotating my content. It's okay, I think. All right. So yeah, strategy training, okay, finding connections, inferences based on background knowledge. So all types of pre-reading activities are very valuable because the reading wouldn't work only by the material itself. So they have to be ready for that. And I can be using my synchronous class as an introduction to activate their schemata, basically. Predicting about the text content, previewing skills. Most of the time we disregard, we ignore previewing skills, but they're very important. Visualizing text content, like working with graphic organizations, seeing the skeleton of the text before they read the text line by line, seeing the organization and skeleton of the text, seeing the flow of discussion might be very, especially also useful for their departmental courses. Analyzing these courses, sometimes we would be working with top-down strategies and sometimes bottom-up. So looking at one connector, for example, and predicting the rest of the text, or sequencing the text using the contextual clues might be a very good idea, might give them some idea about text organization, even about writing itself. So you can use reading to teach anything. You can use reading to teach coherence. You can use reading to teach reading, to teach content, even to teach, input materials like APA, or even writing itself, because a good reading tells a lot about a good writing. Constructing gist statements, like annotating text, making summaries. Summaries are very important, and we're just treating summaries as a part of our citation inputs. But, making a good summary is a life skill, and that's very also necessary in their departmental courses. So why don't we ask them to make quick summaries, okay, about different sections of the text? Very useful, seeing the gist. Linking it to a listening, linking it to a formerly made discussion, linking it to some other outside material, of course. And when it is not working well, maybe we may they can be using their dictionaries, they can read again. So we can even talk about this to help our students be better readers in time. Of course, this takes some time, but at the end of the English 101 or English 102 or even 211, or at the end of your elective course, if you can give the idea to your students that, actually I can understand when I read, and reading is not always a very frustrating task. Sometimes it's even enjoyable. I think you've achieved your targets and you're the winner. Text annotation, one of the strategies again. And at the end of the day, again, it all comes down to reaction, evaluation, appreciation of the content. This brings me to the 4 dimensions of reading as suggested by Schenk. So there's this literal comprehension. We sometimes pay a lot of attention to literal comprehension. So those comprehension questions. So the information, the idea written explicitly in the text. But let's also not forget to address inferential comprehension, like providing the main idea when there is no, okay, like inferring cause and effect relationship. What might be the reason why the writer wrote so, hani gibi, okay? Evaluation, making judgments, hani, checking the soundness of the statements or the ideas, and of course later, as you might predict, reacting, evaluation of the content. So when you're designing your reading activities arkadaşlar, please keep in mind these 4 dimensions. Acaba, are we also adding some components from inferential comprehension? Is there appreciation at the end? Have I prepared a post-reading activity which would make them think or react to the text? Then it would be a complete process and would be very useful for our students, basically. Okay, so we talked about this flow, so I'm not going to be talking about it anymore. Just to remind you, okay, this is a classic, typical synchronous, flipped reading lesson flow. Now let's have a look at some sample activities. Like some pre-reading, some while reading, reading for a different purpose, and reading in relation to a different skill. At this moment, arkadaşlar, I'd like to say that all the mini activities, so they're not, dream activities, believe me, they're most of the time the things that you've been always been doing in your classes, some mini ideas. They can be implemented in traditional classrooms, and they can also be implemented in flipped classrooms by using some tools like Padlet or some virtual walls or some collaborative authoring tools like Google Docs maybe. But you can find a way to turn them into some electronic formats. Yeah, and I think we all know different software and different web sites. I hope we will be able to exchange this information also. Okay. So a collaborative mind map. This would go with your reading class, even with your listening class, with any skill. So you can check Kaggle. I'm going to be showing a slide of suggested websites at the end of my presentation. This one I tried with Kaggle itself. You can have your students come together and create a mind map. So everyone's contribution will be visible. So it's a collaborative, interactive tool. So it's just the mind maps we would be putting on board on our blackboards or whiteboards, but they can do it on virtual walls. So you can go with that. And this mind mapping, of course, can be followed by asynchronous reading or jigsaw reading in your synchronous classes, and even jigsaw reading and listening in breakout rooms. So we'll be talking about how you can do it also in our listening slides. Okay, so mind mapping. Is this possible online? It is possible. You can either share the link with your students and they would be there on the wall, okay, or you would be sharing, the link with one of your students in the breakout rooms, and by sharing his or her screen, the student can facilitate this tool in their groups, for example. Okay, this is really easy and very life-saving, I think. Okay. All right, so this is one of my favorite reading activities, because I can talk about this for like ever, because what I think, utilizing this tool, graphic organizers, I mean, help me explain a lot of things at once. So, for example, I try to adapt all the sample activities to one of the themes in the books, basically. So, for example, one of the reading texts in our course book, the one about Atatürk. Okay, so before you ask your students to read the text, you may ask them to find the best graphic organizer that would represent the organization of this text. So the examples that I'm going to show you will be adapted to one of our English course books or course contents. But dear elective language instructors, you can adapt all these things to your classes as well. Because I don't know about your content, I couldn't give examples from your lessons, unfortunately. But you can get the idea and adapt them in the way you like. So graphic organizers, they're perfect tools for teaching organization, teaching text organization, even teaching writing. I mean, for example, is this the one? Is this the text organization that best illustrates Mustafa Kemal Atatürk's text? Or is it this one? Or is it this one? You can share the screen, or you can put them on any slides, and you can show them to your students. And by activating a poll on your WebEx, for example, they can very quickly choose the one they like. So it's really easy. And in your poll, in your WebEx poll, for example, you would just be writing 1, 2, or 3, okay? Or you can give them some time, and then at the end of the time duration, you can ask them to respond, so that others will not be seeing the others' answers. So, for example, this one doesn't represent the organization of Atatürk's text, because the introduction doesn't only belong to paragraphs number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, but it applies to the whole text. I mean, it's the introduction of the whole thing. So I think this one is the best option here, if you remember Atatürk's text. Okay, so you can talk about it. So these are, so this is the introduction part, this is the conclusion part, this is the different paragraphs, the development part of the text. Zaten Atatürk's text is maybe not the perfect example here, because we have subtitles. So you can adapt this activity to a more complicated text to make them think more on the issue. How do they decide on the best illustration? They would be using connectors, they would be using hooks, they would be using discourse markers and everything. Without reading the content of the text, they will have a good idea about text organization. And Elif Hoca just has a question. How can we actually, these are things that you can do on Word by adding, text boxes. Elif Hocam, I didn't use a tool here. I just, designed the graphic organizer myself using the tool. Okay. All right. So you can, and after graphic organizers, after this discussion, this is a perfect pre-reading activity, for example. This is a perfect pre-reading activity. This can be followed by close reading or asynchronous close reading, or this can be followed by writing summaries or just statements synchronously. This can be used for teaching text annotation. This can be used before your jigsaw reading and listening. And this can even be used before teaching writing organization. So with one text, there is a whole bunch of things you can do, arkadaşlar. That's why I'm a huge fan of reading and teaching reading, because with one text, I have a lot of options. So it's like the treasure material I have in front of me, in my hands. I can use it for many different purposes. That's why I like teaching a lot. So I hope I can give you some inspiration. Screenshots of the text, the media from Unit 3. So give the paragraphs in jumbled order and tell your students not to read the full thing, okay? So without, being lost in the details, they can, quickly skim through the text and, put them in the best order. The longer the text, the more difficult it gets, of course. So if it's really a very long text, like It's a Rich Man's World, you may want to break this act. Maybe. And I can safely argue book are well organized to such activities. So here, word however, for example, in paragraph 10, so they will have to find a arguments before gibi, or if there is if there are additional signals, they will have to put them in order gibi. So this is a perfect pre-reading activity, and then you can get into the text. Of course, this can be followed by close reading or discourse analysis. So this is both bottom-up and top-down, which makes it a perfect pre-reading activity. Another one is inserting subheadings. Actually, we have such tasks in our materials, but with another one, or elective language instructors can also use this technique, use this activity for their own reading texts. Like this is from Unit 4. I've written other subheadings for the other parts of the text, and I want my students to match them. Why would I want them to do it? Because I would want them to practice their summary skills, discourse analysis skills. I would want them to see connectors, all sorts of things. So although it seems to be a very simple idea, it activates a lot of things in the mind. This is speed reading activity, and can then be followed. You can ask your students to go and read the text. Necla, question. Sometimes they have an idea about the text now. They know the topic, they know the scope of the text, so they got familiarized with the text. 2 hours time, they should be able to read and do maybe answer some of the comprehension. I mean, this wouldn't be very frustrating. But we should make actual homework, that's for sure. Otherwise, they would be feeling frustrated. Okay? Peki, you might have a question. This is okay, but how am I going to do it online? Okay. Sync class time to implement the skill. Basically, I'm showing you here, you can put them on your PowerPoint slides or like Jamboard or Padlet. You can skip through and jot down in their notebooks. So just make them see the text somehow by sharing your screen or by using it. And for such activities, I advise you to use screenshots of the PDF documents. For example, I'm sorry. So you can use screenshots document to play around, of course. So using a virtual wall, or using PowerPoint slides, using screen sharing, you can make to the material and you can ask them to fulfill the task. That's really easy. But giving these handouts, sending them via email and asking these materials, telling them that we would be doing it in this class wouldn't work. The printout. So you should find a way to make it visible in your synchronous. Okay. Semantic maps is another one. It's good for vocabulary development, and it's also good for the reading as well. You should be choosing the most important keywords, of course, of the text. Gibi. You can, divide them into breakout rooms, give 2 semantic maps to each group, and there you go. They would be looking at online dictionaries, using their online tools. They would be filling in their semantic maps, and then we would be reporting to one another. A perfect collaborative class, which is very easy and very doable. Okay. Can be followed by vocabulary study or close reading or even jigsaw reading. You can omit a paragraph. That's also possible. Without referring them to the textbook, because they have the full, the complete text there. Just don't make them see the text. Don't make them see the book. Just omit one part and then show other sections. My screenshots and design the full flow of the text so that students, where it was taken from. It's really easy. Your screenshots and your design, and they will be, reading, discourse markers, trying to place it. This fast reading, this activates analysis, both bottom-up and top-down, a perfect pre-reading activity. Or they even actually will have a very clear idea of what the text is, so it's going to be even easier the next. Why, for example, why between 8 and between 2 and 3? So the students should have a reason for they would utter, would be about text organization or discourse. A perfect discussion for a reading class, for a language class itself. You can also make use of text to, practice cohesive or any other discourse components. Here, just some. And this is not a quiz nor a cohesion exercise. So, there may be more than one alternative. It's okay, or as long as the sentence is meaningful, I think it's okay. Even use one text to teach coherence or writing. Some discourse analysis. So what are some of the keywords or linkers? You can give this to a group. You can ask them to, scan the text, trying to find out these markers. You can give another task to another group, in a breakout room. At this time, those people in that breakout group would be, highlighting paraphrases or quotations or, parentheses, citations. So if we consider this setting now, think about it. I have some breakout rooms, and each breakout room has one component, has one mission in line with academic conventions. We will be teaching academic conventions in 101. Instead of, explaining everything one by one as the teacher, I may ask my students to discover things themselves. So each room would be working on a different component of academic writing. And when we're together, that would be a perfect discussion. That would be a perfect lesson for academic conventions, for example. One group might be talking about citations, another group might check content, another group might check cohesive devices, and that's what academic conventions is all about. And after that, if you go and watch, if our students go and watch what Burçin prepared for academic conventions, the H5P interactive videos, that's a perfect lesson plan again. Okay. All right. So this is a simple activity, but sometimes the simple the better. It shows a lot of things to our students. Again, in breakout rooms, they can fill in this table. How, Elif, how are they going to use this table? Am I going to send a Word document? You can send them a Word document. For example, in breakout rooms, you can send this Word document to one of your students, okay? And that student can share his or her screen, and all together in collaboration, they can fill in the charts. Or you can, design a Google Doc, Google Forms, and they can be, writing their responses. So it's really easy. You can also use the Word most of the time, Office programs. I mean, it's really not difficult. So main idea, key vocabulary, important information, distinguishing between, important and relatively less important information, and comments. So you remember the 4 dimensions: appreciation, reaction, evaluation, very important. So this is like, hop, şöyle bir wrapping up the whole thing actually. This can be followed by discussions, debates, even writing, listening, or jigsaw reading. You can relate it to anything. Mini summary notes. I like this activity. I'm a fan of this activity again. So on your virtual wall, for example, for this sample, I use Jamboard, one of the former texts in one of our textbooks. I want, for example, I can ask my students to post mini summaries next to each paragraph. Okay, so Jamboard is a virtual wall. You create your Jamboard. You have a wall. Okay, just like Padlet. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Just like Padlet, you can send the link to your students, or you can email the board to your students. And once you do it, they will have access. And if their role is adjusted to the editor, they have the chance to, edit, add, insert material into the wall. So it's a collaborative space, just like Padlet. So, for example, what I would do with this activity is to post parts of the texts, maybe one by one, okay, and ask my students in their virtual, breakout rooms to arrive at a consensus and put mini sticky notes next to each paragraph to summarize, okay? To summarize this section. For example, what is the function of this paragraph? Why has the writer written this introduction but not another? What is the function? Or if you were to label this paragraph, how would you label it? What is its function? What is this necessary, or why is this useful? Arkadaşlar, it's useful for, for many purposes. I mean, it's useful for understanding gists. It's useful for, summaries. It's useful for speed reading. I mean, and after you do it, then you can very safely say, okay, now it's time to read the text in more detail. So close reading may follow. You can see this is a perfect activity, perfect pre-reading activity, I think. Of course, you can relate your classroom reading to outside readings. For example, we have Atatürk's text in Unit 1. But if you want to add some variety, if you want to make the unit even more in parallel with the agenda of the world today, I just made a quick search and I found, like many articles about coronavirus, and it seems that female leaders are managing the process, managing this crisis even better than male leaders. So there's this discussion, for example. One of them is from World Economic Forum, the other one is from Forbes, another one is from a journal from Forbes, for example. I found in the database about managing crisis in leadership at times of crisis. Again, from a journal This is, I think, from World Economic Forum, as you can see. So, and these are different genres. Some of them are more academic, some of them are less. And register level is also different. So you can even use this by, you know, giving one academic and one non-academic reading to breakout rooms and ask them find a difference between the two texts in terms of academic conventions. So you see, it's a perfect pre-activity for academic conventions, starting teaching academic conventions, for example. Okay, so the last one was from The Economist. So this can be followed by speaking, synthesizing, listening. You can, you know, in one of them, if I'm not mistaken, for example, in this one, there are leadership traits, leadership characteristics. You know, they can make a quick synthesis between Atatürk's leadership skills and, you know, leadership skills that are necessary for today's world. For example, how is it different? Do leaders need to have other traits today in the modern era? You know, kind of a discussion, for example, would be a very good one. Don't you think so? Okay. Or the distinguishing between academic and non-academic and writing their reasons, for example, and then reporting them back to one another. So you see, there are a lot of things you can do with a reading text. I think I mentioned jigsaw reading, so I'm not going to talk about it once again. You can use your breakout rooms, give one part of the text, and then can be followed by close reading, listening, or discussion, of course. You can also relate your classroom reading to outside reading. For example, in NPR's website, I found a very good interview about leadership and coronavirus again. So you can relate it to Unit 1. And there you go. It's authentic listening material, which is somehow linked to classroom material. And then you can ask them to find their own leaders at times of crisis, for example, or you can go with the female leaders. You can go with the leaders who managed crises. So that's also, that would be a very good speaking alternative. Okay, so I think I'm basically done with reading. Can I now check the time, because I'm so, you know, into talking. Okay, so the timing is good. Arkadaşlar, are we doing? You know, I don't want to keep you here all day, so I'm speaking a little fast. I'm really sorry about that. But these are things we already know. So I just wanted to inspire you about what you can do in your online classes, because these are all doable in a synchronous online classroom. And some of them can be done asynchronously as well. Okay, thank you, Ayşem Hocam. You're great. Shall we? Would you like to take a break? I don't really want to overwhelm you. Again, 5 minutes break. We can continue. Maybe continuing and finishing a little early. Would that be a better option? Any ideas? You can use the chat box, please. Yeah, I know. The lunch break is coming. Değil mi? Tamam hocam. Let's go on. Yes. Continue. Okay. Thank you, arkadaşlar, for bearing with me. Thank you. You're very, you know, cooperative. Thank you very much. Okay. So similar things. Listening. Okay. Yeah. All right. So the listening skill. What can we do with listening? It is again difficult for our students. What is not difficult for our students when it comes to language skills, language learning, unfortunately. But you know, when the tasks are meaningful, when they teach them some strategies, when they see meaning between what we do in class and what they do in their departmental courses, I think things become meaningful and they start to change their attitudes. So all the reading, you know, mini activities I've just shown you, would also hopefully in the long run help them, cope with some of the reading materials that they would face in their department. So not only comprehension, but also some strategy teaching. I think that's the message here. So why is this difficult? Why is listening difficult? By its nature, it's even more difficult because it's not visible, but it's only audible. Okay. The speaker himself or herself might be difficult to understand. There is no control over the speed of the input. But we have our asynchronous time, so people who have problems with listening skill can use this time to practice even more. And if a student approaches you and asks you to find more, to have some more chances for practice, please, send him or her more, audio materials. That would be nice. There's no pause option, especially if we're doing it in our synchronous classes. And sometimes they have additional responsibilities like note-taking, so it's embedded in the task itself. There might be unknown vocabulary, they may not know about the topic. So when you have a look at this page, you can see some of the things are things that we can control, we can solve, or we can help them with, like if they don't know about the topic, of course, that's a problem. So before we let them listen to something, of course, we have to do some pre-listening activities so that they're more, they're readier, let's say. Length of the material, maybe pausing at some specific time and continuing later on might be a good alternative. And again, strategy training. Very important. So how can we do that? Changing attitude. This will be too much repetition, so I'm not going to go there again. But I think this should be the starting point of every skill we're dealing with as language instructors. So designing meaningful and purposeful activities comes into play at this stage. Just listen to this and fill in the task sheet. They will not change their attitudes, that's for sure. And it's not meaningful, it's not interactive, it doesn't give anything to our students. They wouldn't be doing it. Why would they be doing it? Yani, if you were in their shoes, why would you be doing it? So, integrating skills, somehow finding a way to integrate reading, speaking, or some other skill to reading, and strategies. Prediction about the content, finding relationships, problem solving, like pausing and then listening to it again, maybe using the script at times. That's even a problem solving strategy for listening. And of course, evaluation. So if we remember, if you remember the 4 dimensions of the reading, let's have a look at 4 dimensions of listening. So activating prior knowledge. Okay. Identifying main ideas and details, yes. Reaction and evaluation, making them think about the content, making them comment about the content. These are, again, should be some dimensions that we need to address while designing our listening tasks. And very quickly, let's have a look at some sample listening activities. This flow, we talked about it. How can we fill it in? This is the flow, but how can we fill it in? So let's see. Şimdi, it's not, again, very meaningful to sit in front of the computer in your synchronous class and have them listen to something and take notes or answer comprehension questions. That's not the ideal lesson for listening, of course, as you all know. So what can we do in place of that? Again, some mind maps, or putting a picture on a virtual wall and asking them to come up with the keywords that they can think about in relation to the text. Using your Google Docs or Google Forms to turn some of the book content into electronic content. This is from Unit 1, for example. We have a mini poll in the textbook, and you can, just transfer it into Google Docs. Or as another pre-listening activity, so we're going to listen to student presentations on leadership types. What might be 5 words that you think will appear, that you think you will hear in the listening? You can use your dictionary or thesaurus. Again, they can do in their groups, they can come up with 5 words, and when we're all together again, they can report, they can talk a bit, they can introduce the word, they can introduce the collocations of the word, so it would be a perfect vocabulary study before the reading itself. And all the words will somehow be about leadership, which will prepare the reader, prepare the students for the listening material. Or you can use Poll Everywhere and design a quick poll, and you can use it in your synchronous classes. Which adjectives would you use to describe a good leader? Just like a mind map, you can use a mini poll. I think Poll Everywhere is a very user-friendly tool, and you can embed it in many places in your classes. Again, you can go with semantic maps, or you can ask them to skim a text before they read and listen to something. So reading can sometimes be the pre-activity for listening as well. So some synchronous while listening tasks. So these are things that these are things that you can do before you assign the listening for the asynchronous time, okay? So do this, you get them ready for the listening, and then you can assign. Okay, now arkadaşlar, for our asynchronous class time, please listen to this lecture and, take down notes, then we're going to compare our notes. Or please listen to this lecture and then answer the comprehension questions, then we're going to check them together, hani gibi. But you can also use listening, okay? So I'm changing the order. You can also use listening to energize your synchronous classes as well. So when I'm together with my students on WebEx, how can I make them listen to something? How can I use this skill? How can I facilitate this skill? Actually, there are tools that may help you. Edpuzzle is one of them. I mean, some of you know about the tool, I know, but if you don't, I think you'll fall in love with this tool because it's a very easy and user-friendly web-based tool. Basically, you upload your material, the video, or you just find it on YouTube. There's a YouTube, there's a YouTube icon and it is embedded there. So basically, you can find it on YouTube. Your TED Talks, for example, your CBT materials, or other videos that you'll be using in your classes. You find it there, and you can add questions or pauses. For example, while you're together with your students in synchronous classroom, you can share your screen, you can start the video, and at some point the video will pause and the question will appear. For example, this is the wrong screenshot. Actually, I have questions here, arkadaşlar. So these are all questions about this video. So at some point, the video will stop and the question will appear. It might be a multiple choice question, or it might be a comprehension question. It might be a true-false question. And using the chat button, students can answer, or they can jot the answers down, or you can, discuss in oral format. You can answer the questions all together in discussion format. So this is a very good tool to make your listening classes possible and more collaborative for synchronous listening time. Okay, and it can be followed by another listening or discussion itself. As I mentioned in the reading section, arkadaşlar, you can also, design activities where some of the students would be listening and some of the students would be reading. Then they would be regrouped, and the ones who listen to a video or audio would tell about it, while the others would be talking about the reading. For such activities, I really like the idea of give one, get one activity. They give one information and they get one information in response. So they have to give them something, some information in order to receive new information from the others. So they can continue with this as much as they can provide them with information. And they can fill in a chart, or they can, jot down in their notebooks. And then, as a whole class discussion, you can continue. Maybe. So, for example, this is a reading text about the pandemic, and this is another listening about pandemic, and it's about leadership. Acaba are they suggesting the same things? Why were the successful? Do they have different reasons, or do they have different evidence? So they can talk about it and report it back to class. And for discussion, and then you can ask their opinion about the issue. For example, how was the pandemic managed in your country? What do you think? Okay, and ask them to fill a questionnaire or forum. You can create a forum on Ot2Class, and after discussing this, they can talk about how the crisis was managed, is being managed by the leader in their country. Okay. So you can, after making them listen to something, you can ask them to come up with the best summary for this listening, and this can be followed by listening comprehension or discussion or debate. Summary related tasks are always very possible to get the gist out of it. Sometimes we can use the script actually as the material itself. So before they listen to the actual file, they may predict the order of the script, and then they can check their order by listening to the audio. That's also a very good activity. The paragraphs in jumbled order, and then ask them to put them in the correct order as they listen, and they will have a perfect purpose for listening. They have done something, and they will check whether it's true or it's correct or not. So it's a meaningful purpose, and it teaches a lot about organization. It teaches a lot about hearing, hooks, bridging sentences. So okay. There are also tools for interactive speaking. I mean, listening, but that foster interactive speaking. This is from Flipgrid, arkadaşlar. Again, another tool that you'll fall in love with. This is really easy. They just talk, or they just talk in front of their cameras, and the software records it, and you have a class there. Everyone can see one another's video, and they can write comments. They can, add reactions and comments under the recorded files. I mean, for example, this is a discussion for one of my CBT components. So I've asked some personalization questions, and I've asked them to Flipgrid, dear Tamay Hocam, I'm going to show all these tools that I mentioned at the end of my presentation. So they just record themselves. They just record their voices or themselves as you're welcome, and they can post them. It's really easy, and everyone can comment. So this is a collaborative environment where there is listening and there is interaction. And the best thing about such tools is these are listening materials generated by students. So students are listening to one another. So there's speaking and listening embedded into one another. And that's a perfect way to start your readings, or it might be a perfect Gonca hocam galiba değil mi? Prepared an introduction to the term discussion, speaking activity on Flipgrid, for example. So you can use it for many purposes. can be followed by reading or listening or discussion in your synchronous class time. İşte this is the asynchronous but online component, as Future Learn suggested. It's online, but it's asynchronous. Okay. Or you can use VoiceThread. It's like Flipgrid. This time they would be recording their voices or videos, and everyone can comment, and it creates a thread, like, you know. This is also very user friendly and it's free. You copy the link or send via email. This is again a student generated interactive speaking listening tasks. So, for example, as for asynchronous homework, you can ask them to record their voice discussing a certain issue. So this is not really frustrating. This is even enjoyable. They would be hearing one another, you know, commenting on one another. And the best thing about these tools is that they help you build community. I think that's very important. Yani when your students start talking to one another, when they start reacting to one another, be it ODTÜ Class Forum or VoiceThread or Flipgrid or some other platform or Padlet even, I think these will help you build some community, and you know, instead of getting frustrated, they will even see their English, you know, studies as a relief, hopefully. Am I looking too much on the bright side? I don't know. But this can be followed by reading, listening, or discussion. And you can design some asynchronous listening tasks. You know, there are all types of varieties. It totally depends on your purpose, and it totally depends on the targets that you want to reach. For example, you can ask them to listen to one of your TED Talks or videos or audio files, but you should be able to edit it so that the end of the talk is not there anymore. So there are some editing tools, like Audacity, I think, is one of them. You can find them on the web. There are a lot of audio, video editing tools. And actually, Edpuzzle, if it's a video, Edpuzzle edits it. You can cut it at some certain points. And you may ask them to, you know, watch the video and, you know, think about the rest of the video. They can write a script for the end of the video. This, again, this is about personalization, because this is the way they would continue this talk. And this is about, you know, creativity. So all, you know, upper levels of the ladder, you know, you're addressing them. They're producing, they're creating, they're evaluating. So a very simple activity, but it's a very good one, again. And then when you're all together in your synchronous class, you can continue with the discussion. Or, this is something I'm thinking right now. Ask your students to continue the talk by using Flipgrid, for example. Okay, now I'm, you know, synthesizing the two activities, and ask the others to comment on one another's recordings. So I think that would be a very good activity again. So the good old KWL charts, of course, you can use them for reading or listening. And some very simple short activities to, you know, facilitate metacognitive skills, like pay attention to these words as you listen. What might they mean? So instead of focusing on other parts of the text, they may focus on the meanings of some certain texts. This is good for bottom-up listening. Or what discourse you may ask them to find out discourse markers. This is good for text organization. Or you can, you know, ask them to, you know, somehow react to the content of the text. These are like You know, you can use this idea for your reading classes or your listening classes, or at the end of your synchronous classes, you can, you know, use an exit ticket idea like this one. I think these are very useful for especially formative assessment. And you can use these grade your participation grades as well, just an irrelevant idea. Okay. So I think I'm basically done with sample listening and reading activities. Let me check the time. Okay, so we're good. So some of the websites I mentioned, hani Tamay Hocam, you asked me. So you can have a look at them, or you can take a screenshot if you like. Or we're recording it anyway. So Google Forms, Google Docs, Koggle as a mind mapping tool, Padlet, Jamboard. I very much, and Padlet too, of course. Flipgrid is a very good one again, and Poll Everywhere. And I'm sure you have your own list. I mean, these are some of the things I've suggested. Yeah, that I try to explain how we can implement them through these tools. Ama, of course, there are you know, millions of other websites, even better ones. So be a very good idea if we can exchange this information maybe on another platform sometime later. You're welcome. But listening is made easy by Flipgrid and VoiceThread, and you know, writing something collaboratively is made easy by Google Docs or Poll Everywhere. Reaction is very easy by the chat function or Poll Everywhere, and any kind of, you know, contribution with texts, with messages, with post-its. It's very easy via Padlet or Jamboard. So you can use your traditional activities and turn them into some sort of flipped format. It's really not very difficult. There's always a tool. Okay, so now I think I'm, you know, finishing up, you know, like concluding. So before I finish, I want to very briefly go over some of the key principles that we need to consider as we plan our classes, as the concluding part of my presentation today. So what is your learning objective? Please consider them while, you know, making the plan. So if it is reading, if you really want to talk about discourse analysis, if discourse analysis is at the core of that lesson, for example, you may want to keep it for the synchronous class. So what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What do you want your students to practice, okay, for your synchronous classes? And promoting inclusivity. This is actually an idea that I get from the webinar on Future Learn. So basically, look at this chart. So the upper part of the table is high bandwidth. I mean, it requires more internet, a better internet connection, and a better internet actually. And the upper part of the table, actually, the yellow, the green and the blue parts, do not require a very strong, powerful internet connection. So you may want to keep this in mind. Some of our students may have their disadvantages. So not only relying on audio conferences or video conferences, for example, but also, you know, transferring some of the material to some collaborative documents or discussion boards might be a good alternative. And there's this also the immediacy variable here, as you can see. These are not immediate, so you don't have to do it at once. But the red and the blue ones require high immediacy, so everyone being together and having to do it there at that specific time. So thinking about these four variables, you may want on your courses, because you know, if there is something you can cover via Ot2Class forum, for example, you can take it there so that students will not be disadvantaged because of their low internet connection mesela yani. So you may want to think about it as you plan your courses. Do not only rely on high bandwidth and high immediacy tasks. That's just an idea you may want to keep in mind. Okay. Of course, planning, organization, informing, setting routines, making it clear. Okay, if this is confusing, it's not gonna work. So just plan and you know.
Gülüşte Manav gelmiş. 2 saat kalıyor galiba.
Seher hocam. Okay, I couldn't understand, Seher hocam. Did you say something to me? I'm sorry. Seher hocam, I heard you. I thought you were saying something to me.
No. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Informing students about the components, setting up a routine. We talked about it. Oops, I'm sorry. Okay. And setting the stage for successful interaction, like for example, I'm sorry. This is spoiler alert. So is the environment okay? Can they see you? Is the lighting okay? Is your voice heard? You know, a good atmosphere for successful interaction and engagement. This is what we've been talking about anyway, so I'm not going to be talking more about it. And this quote, I like it very much. Socialization can't be built around coffee and lunch breaks with our students, but it needs to be built through tasks. I think that's the best way. Okay, so checking my stuff. And my final, the final remark would be this message actually. So the hidden message for today's talk was that good teaching pedagogy remains the same, whatever the context. I hope you liked it as much as I did. And I'm finishing, but before I finish, I ask you something, arkadaşlar. This is a PDU session, and I'm there in front of you, but there's something missing. What is it? Can you use the chat box? I am organizing something. It's a PDU session, and there are no somethings. I don't know. What is it? Cookies? Sometimes cookies, but there is something else which you might be associating with my PDU sessions. Okay, interaction. That's even a better answer. Apples, thank you very much, Tamay hocam. So this time I will not be giving you apples. Normally I would, but what could I do? Because this is online, so I thought about it. Can I add some mini humor element here? And instead of being able to give you apples, arkadaşlar, I will be giving you a healthy apple tea recipe at the end of my You can take a screenshot, and this is good for boosting our immunity. So this is a little mini humor, but might be also useful at this time of the pandemic. Arkadaşlar, while you're taking screenshots, maybe I'd like to thank dear Burçin because I've been inspired by, she's one of our former trainers. I've been inspired by some of her ideas, and dear Gonca for letting me know all the useful ideas she got from Cambridge webinars. So they're always supporting me. Thank you very much. And my dear friends in the admin for giving me this opportunity to share, because, cooperation, collaboration, and sharing, exchange of information from whichever channel it is, I think is very important, especially today. And these are that and I'd like to thank everyone for being patient and cooperative. Thank you very much. Okay, I think I'm done. So let me stop sharing my screen.
Elif'ciğim. Ağzına sağlık.
Ben çok teşekkür ederim. Çok uzun bir konuşma oldu. Biraz da yüklü oldu. Please, I'm sorry it was really long and it was maybe a little, I don't know, overwhelming maybe. But I hope it was useful for everyone. I hope it gave you some inspiration. And now our summer school instructors, if you have, your life-saving strategies, this is what I did, or this is the tool I use. So I think we can spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes for interaction or any suggestions, anything you may want to add. Elif, I did it this way and it worked really well, honey, during summer school, because actually our summer school instructors are more experienced than most of us. They've just tried it very recently. So if there are some ideas that can be generalized to many contexts, we would love to hear about them, or any useful tools. I don't know, you can write them in the chat box. Or if you may have any questions, I will be happy to answer if I can, of course. So the floor is yours if there are people who want to say something. Yes. No? Okay, everyone is tired, huh? Değil mi? Doğru. Mhm.
Elif'cim, do you remember the Jeopardize activity you prepared years ago?
Oh yes, Didem
Yeah,
hocam.
yeah, it is really very fun to use actually during the classes, even on online platforms.
Yes.
The students love that.
Jeopardize Labs miydi? I don't remember the tool right now, but it's when you say, prepare Jeopardy Lab galiba.
It was something like
yes,
that.
something like a Jeopardy Lab, I think. Yeah. So you can use it for reading and even for listening. That's a very good idea. Even for vocabulary. Didem, thank you for reminding us of the tool.
Yeah.
Thank you. And can be used in online classes as well. By screen sharing. Did you use it by screen sharing, Didem hocam?
Yes.
Yes, that's a very good idea.
Yeah, generally we use, we group the students and they compete each other. But here they totally participate individually. But still, I take notes of the correct answers and find the winner at the end of the game. It was really fun for the students.
Oh, it's because there's gamification, just like Kahoot.
Exactly, they enjoyed that.
They like it. Yeah, so adding some gaming elements in our synchronous classes is also a very good idea, which I missed actually. So thank you, Didem. Thank you very much. That's a very good contribution to this presentation. Okay. Right. Any other questions or suggestions? Or shall we artık finish? Okay. All right. So I hope arkadaşlar we will have more opportunities to come together even online and share information. So it's the best time for sharing because we have different experiences and it's the best time for exchanging information. So maybe during the term we can, have some sharing sessions to get together and talk about things in general. That might be a good idea. So if you ever happen to use a very good tool, if you ever happen to discover something new on the web, which would, change our classes, please share them with us so that everybody knows. Okay. So arkadaşlar, I think that's it. I don't want to force you to speak. I think we're all tired. So thank you very much again for your participation, for your patience, and for your cooperation. And I wish everyone good health, first of all, and a very good, nice term, let's say. Okay, thank you.